Xie Shu sacrificed herself for her family in the first half of her life, and the family abandoned her. She did not resent her and buried herself in the palace for nearly 5 years. In the end, she was forced to end up with a marriage. Fate gave her a chance to make another choice. She loved freedom. In the past 5 years, she only repaid her kindness of childbirth. From now on, she only wanted to be selfish for herself. But why did this little doll come to her side? In the brief first half of his life, he lived carefree, but later on, wolves and smoke rose everywhere, and mountains and rivers shattered. The ups and downs of life are only for revitalizing the old mountains and rivers. Su Yan said to Xie Shu, "Sister Huang, you will always be with me, right?" Later, Su Yan saw that his own imperial sister was kind to another man, and the knife in his hand fluctuated only for her pleasure. Keywords of the novel. Huang Jie, I made a mistake without a pop-up window. Huang Jie, I made a mistake. Download the complete text. Huang Jie, I made a mistake. Read the latest chapter. Chapter 1. Entering the Palace. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Entering the Palace. Kyoto, Rongwa Mansion. Creak, creak. A inconspicuous blue-gray carriage swayed out of the side door of Rongwa Mansion and headed towards the busiest part of the Dun dynasty. The palace is the place where power and money are most concentrated in the country. At this moment, Xie Shu in the car was reading a book of poetry with great interest. The car was very simple and could not compare to her residence at home. She still read the book in her hand with ease and care, but her eyes were slightly dull. An hour ago, Empress Xiao secretly summoned her to the palace, but she knew nothing about it except for her father and herself. However, why did the Empress secretly announce her entry into the palace? Over the years, her grandparents have not been feeling well, and she rarely walks around to better accompany them. Anyway, the Empress Dowager must have never seen her before, let alone announced her entry into the palace at midnight. What if my grandparents had something good or bad? With doubts in mind, he followed the swaying carriage into the palace in the darkness. Fengyi Palace, dressed in bright yellow palace attire, embroidered with a golden phoenix spreading its wings and ready to fly at the hem of its skirt, draped with a layer of white gauze. The gentle breeze blew, and the silk-like black hair scattered randomly around her waist. The slender figure, with bright eyes and white teeth, lay quietly beside the bed, gazing lovingly at the sleeping child on the bed. That was her crown prince. The emperor is ignorant, indulging in cultivating immortals and practicing Taoism all day long. The treacherous officials control the court, bear heavy burden of corvée labor, and the people complain loudly. It is only a matter of time before the country is destroyed. Looking at the naive and ignorant child on the bed, how could she die with peace of mind? "Madam, Miss Xie is here," Lu Mama exclaimed as she saw the Empress lying here since the crown prince had slept. Empress Zhao's gaze fixed, she slowly stood up, tiptoed towards the outside of the palace, afraid of waking up the child in bed. In the side hall, Xie Shu stands in the center of the hall, quiet like a Buddha statue, neither pleased nor angry nor frightened, as if the person standing here for a few hours is not her. In fact, she is just a 10-year-old child. Xie Shu, who comes from the Rongwa mansion, doesn't understand why Empress Dowager called herself into the palace at this time. The Rongwa mansion and the loyal and brave Marquis mansion, where Empress Xiao comes from, are not related. What is Empress Dowager's intention for this call? As Xie Shu lowered her eyes and pondered, the elegant Empress had already sat on the throne of Fengyi. "Ladies and gentlemen, see Empress Dowager, 1,000 years old, 1,000 years old. Xie Shu, do you know why our palace summoned you today?" A voice full of supreme authority reached her ears, and Xie Shu quickly straightened her mind. Returning to Empress Dowager, "I don't know. I hope Empress Dowager can help me solve this problem," she said after a long silence. The person sitting suddenly chuckled and said, "I don't know which is the best. The light smile in Xie Shu's ear made her hair stand on end, and her head with black and beautiful hair drooped down. Looking at the child in front of her, who was only 4 years older than the emperor, she kindly said to Xie Shu, "Child, I only called you here today for one thing. This palace wants you to become the 5th princess." Upon hearing these words, his face turned pale and he stared at the empress in amazement. He didn't understand what this meant. Pretending to be a phoenix and dragon grandson would be a capital offense. Empress Xiao reiterated her words with a firm tone, "Would you be willing to become the 5th princess in this palace?" Xie Shu Chao, Empress Xiao, knelt down and said with great fear, "Empress Dowager, pretending to be a phoenix and dragon grandson is the death penalty for the 9 clans. It must not be used at all." Empress Xiao's gaze on the phoenix throne suddenly became sharp, and she exclaimed, "Why, are you still unwilling? This is not a matter of willingness or unwillingness. It is a capital punishment for the 9 clans." In my mind, I couldn't understand what the Empress meant by this move. I dare ask the Empress, but what happened to Princess Wu? Empress Xiao has a son and a daughter under her knee. Princess Wu is bedridden all year round and rarely goes out of the palace. She is naturally solitary, while the crown prince is extremely lively at a young age. Is this palace only asking if you are willing or unwilling? She is the daughter of the Xie family and cannot become the 5th princess of the Su dynasty. Feng's eyes narrowed slightly, and her aura suddenly sharpened. She shouted loudly, "Someone, Princess Wu is feeling tired today. Please return to your own palace to recuperate properly." Upon hearing these words, Xie Shu suddenly lifted her head and said, "Empress, you cannot." Before she could finish speaking, Lu Mama brought someone forward and covered her mouth. Xie Shu struggled non-stop, staring at Empress Xiao and pleading with her to change her mind. "Your Highness, you have been sick and confused lately. You are the 5th princess. What is your relationship with the Xie family of the Rongwa mansion? This group of people is simply crazy. How could a cat exchange for a crown prince in broad daylight, doing such a sneaky job?" Seeing Xie Shu struggling harder and harder, Empress Xiao scolded, "Help your Highness down quickly." Upon seeing this, Lu Mama quickly covered Xie Shu's mouth and nose with a handkerchief mixed with sleeping pills. As expected, her struggle gradually diminished, and she fainted as peacefully as falling asleep. "Lu Mama, do I really do this right?" Empress Xiao sat on the phoenix throne dejectedly, as if she was 10 years old. "Madam, what the Xie family owes you should be paid with the life of their legitimate daughter today, and you should be for the Royal Highness Princess and the Prince." When talking about her own children, Empress Xiao suddenly came to her senses and said, "Yes, I don't owe them anything. Today, let's treat them as paying off their debts." Immediately told the nurse, "From now on, you must take good care of the 5th Royal Highness Princess. His Highness is weak. If you have any loss, be careful of your skin, and don't let her leave the Chaoyun Hall at will." "Yes, I will strictly follow the Empress's orders." "All right, you guys go down," he said, waving his hand as if feeling a bit tired. When Xie Shu opened her eyes again, it was already bright outside. At first glance, there was a light yellow light gauze curtain, with a series of tassels on top. It swayed lightly in the wind and moved uncomfortably. It was discovered that beneath me was not the familiar softness, but rather the complex and gorgeous Yunluo silk and satin. Although it was soft, it was still thin and felt incredibly hard. Xie Shu was taken aback. This was not her own boudoir, but the Chaoyun Hall of the 5th princess. There were rumors among the people that the 5th princess had come to love the pink peach blossoms. It seemed that what she said was true, and what came into view through the windowsill was the pink flower see in spring. Sitting up, Xie Shu was surprised to see that she had consumed too much sleeping pills and could only rely on one side of the bed. What was going on? "Your Highness, are you awake?" Perhaps hearing the sound in the inner room, a palace maid dressed in pink and blue walked around a beautiful peach blossom forest screen to the window, and casually hung the curtains on both sides of the bed on the peach blossom hook. Xie Shu looked up at her, with willow eyebrows and an oval face. When she spoke, there were two shallow dimples on her face, and her fair skin showed a hint of red. Her eyes were sparkling as if she could speak. "Are you?" Xie Shu asked weakly. "Go back to Royal Highness Princess, maidservant Xilian, who has just been transferred from the Shanggong Bureau to serve your highness." "No, I'm not, I'm." "The emperor has woken up." Before she could finish speaking, Empress Xiao walked in lightly and sat by the bed waving to signal Xilian to leave. She also touched Xie Shu's full forehead. Huang couldn't help but fall asleep. Why did she think she was Miss Xie from the Rongwa mansion? The game of exchanging identities you played with Miss Xie has long ended. She reached out and nodded at Xie Shu's nose, with a hint of helplessness mixed in her indulgence. Xie Shu's mind was completely blank, as she followed her movements and her cold fingertips brushed against her nostrils. It was only then that she regained her senses, like she had just woken up from a dream and gave a wake-up call. "No, no, I'm not the fifth princess, I'm the eldest daughter of Rongwa Mansion." "Xie Shu!" he shouted hysterically, trying to show that he was not Su Yueming, the fifth Royal Highness Princess of Dun Dynasty. Unfortunately, the Chaoyun Palace was very large, and the huge palace echoed her voice, but no one could answer. She turned over and pushed Empress Xiao away, jumped out of bed, hoping to run towards the outside of the palace. Empress Xiao glanced behind her and Lu Mama hurriedly brought 4 palace maids forward. Suppressing Xie Shu's attempt to jump out of bed and leave, the 4 palace maids held on to Xie Shu's hands and feet to prevent her from struggling, while Lu Mama picked up a bowl of black medicine and fed it to Xie Shu to drink. Unfortunately, Xie Shu was still young, and no matter how hard she struggled, it was of no use. She drank half of the medicine and scattered half on the ground. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Identity Exchange. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2 Identity Exchange. Xie Shu lay on the ground and glared at Empress Xiao unwillingly. She didn't understand why Empress Xiao insisted on doing so. Is she not afraid of her parents coming to find her? Empress Xiao smiled indifferent when she saw Xie Shu staring fiercely at her. She didn't care what Xie Shu thought, as long as she could replace her daughter and become a qualified 5th princess. Xie Shu trembled and said, "Can the Empress let me go home? I miss my grandfather and his family. At this time, I'm still daydreaming." Xie Shu. Squatting down Jean Gui's body, he slightly lifted the head of the girl in front of him, gently stroking her jet black hair. Her eyebrows furrowed slightly, and her face showed confusion. "Child, what's wrong with being the Princess Palace? Why do you want to escape?" Xie Shu pushed Empress Xiao to the ground, shook her head, stood up neatly, and ran towards the outside of the palace. Her only thought was that she wanted to go home, to her own home, rather than staying here. This could never be her Xie Shu's home. Empress Xiao was pushed to the ground, with a flash of shock in her eyes, thinking that the little girl who was powerless to fight back was still trying to escape. Xie Shu ran to the entrance of the palace, vigorously pushing and shoving the door, wanting to go out. Unfortunately, as early as Empress Xiao entered, she had instructed the people guarding outside to lock the door from outside. Without her command, no one could open the door. "Why can't you accept your fate?" A demonic voice came, and Xie Shu turned around, staring angrily at Empress Xiao. The tightly clenched palms hanging on both sides of the light pink palace attire, with slightly sharp nails deeply piercing into the palms, causing waves of piercing pain. "Don't bother, the Xie family has already left the capital and resigned and returned to their hometown." Empress Xiao looked at Xie Shu, who was unwilling to give up in front of her, and could only cruelly and ruthlessly reveal this fact. Unable to bear the huge upheaval anymore, Xie Shu fainted and passed out. Lu Mama approached with some heartache and said, "Madam, have you pushed her too hard?" "Mammy, you don't understand. If we're not ruthless, Yue will suffer. Speaking of her daughter, her face showed infinite tenderness. Besides, the cultivation of her by the Rongwa mansion itself is a chess piece. Why not take on Yue's responsibility? Lu Mama understood in her heart that there was nothing more important in Empress Zhao's heart than her son and daughter. Ever since she learned that the legitimate princess might go out for a marriage, the empress had to stay up all night. It was only after Princess Wu left that she felt better. Looking at Xie Shu lying in bed, she couldn't help but sigh and shake her head. This may be a good destination for her. Returning to the Fengyi Hall, Empress Xiao saw the 5-year-old crown prince sitting on a table in an orderly manner, with a round head combed with braids facing upwards and a drowsy face. She swayed left and right and collapsed without even paying attention, probably feeling extremely sleepy. In a daze, I saw the Empress Dowager come back. The Empress Dowager exclaimed, reaching out to hug her, "Did you go to see Empress Dowager again? Is she better now?" Reaching out to pick up her own son, Empress Xiao felt relieved when she heard the sound of her son's milk panting. Mother has gone to see your imperial sister again. Has Xiao Yan successfully completed the task of the Grand Tutor today? Done, mother, can I go to bed early today? Neng handed his son to the wet nurse and sat in front of the table. After a thorough examination, he was very satisfied. Putting down the homework in his hand, he turned to ask, "She hasn't woken up yet?" He lay on Empress Zhao's body and comfortably snuggled his little head tightly against her neck. Lu Mama took a step forward and said, "Go back to Empress, there's nothing. Only she, Empress Dowager, and the Duke of Rongwa in the Rongwa mansion probably know who she is. It seems that the Duke of Rong is really infatuated. For the sake of the Empress, he could give up his daughter. The two daughters have one palm and one back. His Royal Highness the 5th Royal Highness Princess is undoubtedly the palm, and Xie Shu is undoubtedly the back of the hand. Duke Rongwa has admired his own empress since childhood. It is regrettable that fate has manipulated people. Today, His Majesty has fallen in love with her at first sight and soon became the empress of the central palace. Duke Rongwa fell ill in love and mistook Xie Shu's mother for the Empress Dowager. Soon after, he had Xie Shu. 1 year later, Empress Xiao gave birth to the 5th Royal Highness Princess. Unfortunately, the 5th princess was born prematurely and was born weak. If you want your Highness Royal Highness Princess to go to Mabe to make peace, it will definitely kill the Empress. Only then did this scene of stealing beams and pillars emerge, fearing that the matter would be exposed. Duke Rongwa, using the excuse of recuperating for a long time, invited himself back to his hometown. His Royal Highness the 5th Princess followed the Duke of Rongwa, and Xie Shu stayed here to replace the 5th Princess. As the sky darkened, Xie Shu opened her eyes and looked around at the familiar scenes. In her dream, she went home, where there were her beloved grandparents, her mother, and unborn younger brother. Wake up, but in this unfamiliar place. Xilian heard the sound inside and quickly walked in. She saw His Highness crying under the covers, thinking that Xie Shu had a nightmare. Your Highness, everything else will pass, he patted the blanket and gently comforted. Kai Lian didn't say it was okay, but when she said it, Xie Shu cried more and more fiercely. When Xie Shu was tired from crying, Xilian quickly handed her a cup of warm water and fed it to Xie Shu to drink. Xilian, what time is it? Your Highness, it's time for the hour. You have been sleeping for a long time since the Empress left. Before the Empress left, she instructed you to wake up and meet her. Xilian said as she helped Xie Shu up. Xie Shu was stunned by her movements, and when the warm handkerchief brushed against her face, she shrank her neck. Xilian. Your Highness, has it hurt you? Xie Shu shook her head. As the legitimate eldest daughter of the Rongwa mansion, she couldn't have been unaware of the disappearance of such a big person. There should have been some movement long ago, and besides, her mother wouldn't have left her behind. Xilian skillfully straightened her face, while Xie Shu looked at her face in the mirror. When the two of them arrived at the Fengyi Hall, it was already late at night, and the bright moon hung in the sky, showcasing its selflessness by shining brightly on the earth. The shadow hurriedly moved with those who were rushing forward, standing outside the hall waiting for Empress Xiao's summons. After waiting for a long time in a daze, the Princess of Dun had always been able to enter and exit without being summoned, while Xie Shu stubbornly believed that she was not the fifth princess, but only Xie Shu from the Ronggua mansion. As a courtier, she was not allowed to enter without an edict. Xie Shu outside the door stubbornly waited for Empress Xiao's summons, while Empress Xiao inside the room waited for her daughter to come in and learn to accept her fate. The mother and daughter were deadlocked for an hour. Mammy Lu was a little distressed by Xie Shu standing outside. "Empress, why don't you invite your Highness Royal Highness Princess in first and freeze your Highness's body?" Empress Xiao nodded at Lu Mama's words and said, "Then let her in first." Xie Shu walked in and made a big bow to Empress Xiao, saying, "My daughter Xie Shu, please see Empress Dowager." Empress Dowager Qiansui 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 Qiansui. Lu Mama secretly said that it was not good, and in the blink of an eye, she saw Empress Xiao's face turn black and she wrote, "My Highness, what are you doing? What is your relationship with the eldest princess of Dun and the eldest daughter of the Ronggua mansion, Xie Shu? Please apologize to your mother quickly." After speaking, Xie Shu gave a glance, indicating that she knew the current affairs as a hero. However, Empress Xiao and Xie Shu are now like a needle pointing at Mei Meng, and neither of them is willing to take a step back. Empress Xiao was so angry that Xie Shu gritted her teeth and sneered, "Are you still unwilling to accept your life? Then I'll tell you, Xie Shu, the eldest daughter of the Ronggua mansion, will be the eldest princess of the Dun dynasty from now on, Sui Wiming." "I'm not," Xie Shu said firmly. "What do you admit, or what do you not admit? This palace is not afraid to tell you that the two ancestors of Ronggua mansion, your grandfather and grandmother, as well as your pregnant mother, have left the capital the day before yesterday and returned home with Ronggua." "You're lying, I don't believe it," Xie Shu exclaimed with a kind and amiable face and bright red lips and white teeth, leaving her shocked. Her sharp eyes watched as the person in front of her retreated one after another, and she continued, "Believe it or not, this is already a well-known thing in the world." She casually picked up a cup of tea, feeling a bit bored. "Impossible, my mother and grandparents wouldn't treat me like this." The beauty of the past came to mind one by one, and she couldn't believe this fact. "And what about my dad? He wouldn't want me." Seeing Xie Shu not breaking the sandpot, she asked if she was unwilling to give up. "Do you know who brought up the idea of replacing the crown prince with a civet cat?" Xie Shu's eyes flashed with disbelief. She didn't believe her father wanted her anymore. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Reasons. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3 Reasons. Empress Xiao put down her teacup and said, "It seems you've guessed it already. At this point, no matter how hard I struggled, it was of no use. My parents abandoned me with their own hands, and my grandparents didn't want her anymore." After taking several steps back in a row until there was no way to retreat, he trembled and asked, "Can you tell me why?" "It's okay to tell you. Firstly, our palace is using the corruption and coercion of Duke Ronggua, and your relatives can only agree to ensure the safety of the entire clan. Secondly, at this point, Empress Xiao suddenly walked down from the phoenix throne. Go to Xie Shu's side and speak to her ear. Second, the daughter of my palace, the fifth royal highness princess of the Dun dynasty, is your own sister. What if your majesty knew?" Xie Shu's apricot eyes were bulging in an instant, and her heart was like a tumultuous river. If Princess Wu is her own sister, then she is not born prematurely. Empress Xiao had an affair with her father before entering the palace. This is a serious crime that can truly punish the 9 clans. Although she is young, the aristocratic family has already explained these powerful relationships to them in order to make their legitimate sons and daughters more outstanding. Are you not afraid of me speaking out? If you talk about it, you won't be able to live either, and even those people you care about won't be able to run away. They all have to be buried in this palace. Can you give it a try? After speaking, he looked contemptuously at the girl's film in front of him who didn't know the world. How is she? She lovingly fed the little prince Huang Jie in front of her and asked Mammy Lu behind her. Lu Mama hesitated for a moment, took 2 steps forward, and said with a restless expression, Madam Hui, she hasn't eaten or drunk for the past 3 days. She's huddled alone in the Chaoyun palace, and if she continues like this, her body may not be able to handle it. After a while, Empress Zhao's face changed and she sneered repeatedly, it seems that she really doesn't shed tears until she sees the coffin. Don't worry about her. The food is sent as usual. How long does this palace see if she can hold on? Lu Mama, who had been with Empress Xiao for many years, knew that she had a stubborn temper. This time, she was determined and refused to let Miss Xie out. She respectfully said, yes. Come on, darling, would you like to have another bite? With kanji in one hand and spoon in the other, he coaxed the little prince to eat. In the Chaoyun hall, Xie Lian looked at a large lock hanging on the vermilion door, tightly locking the entire lock. No one could enter except for Lu Mama next to the empress. I don't know what Royal Highness Princess said to the empress 3 days ago. During that time, it seemed that she heard a quarrel between the mother and daughter. What was it exactly? Finally, the empress rushed out of the door, and His Highness sat on the ground in a daze. After that day, His Highness's bedroom was locked together with His Highness himself. These days, His Highness has been eating and drinking, and he is only skin and bones. Suddenly, a chorus of greetings from the palace members came, greet the Empress, Empress Shingen. Xie Lian also greeted Empress Xiao and said, greetings to Empress Dowager, Empress Shingen. Get up, has Princess Wu ever had dinner these days? A cold and almost heartless voice came. He stood up in fear and lowered his head respectfully, saying, Madam Hui, your Highness has not had any food these days. Empress Xiao's face, which had been carefully maintained for many years, almost instantly changed color. Her tone was slightly stern, and she gritted her silver teeth and angrily scolded, okay, really good daughter of this palace. Taking a step back, with sharp eyes fixed on the vermilion door, someone opened the door. The little eunuch, dressed in navy blue, trembled and stepped forward, took out the key, and opened the door in front of everyone's eyes with trembling hands. Xie Shu saw herself walking alone on her way home, passing through the pitch-black night and arriving at the dining hall. Her grandparents, father, mother, and unborn little brother were all present, with smiles on their faces. Mother, it's Shu'er who has returned. I know you haven't abandoned me. Xie's mother smiled brightly and said, Shu'er, come back. We are all waiting for you, come on. Xie's mother waved at Xie Shu, gesturing for her to go quickly. Just as Xie Shu approached Xie's mother, in an instant, Xie's face changed and she said fiercely, what are you doing back here? Are you trying to kill us? Suddenly, both my parents and grandmother disappeared, followed by the silhouette of a thin and frail woman. In the boundless darkness, Xie Shu tentatively walked towards the woman emitting a soft glow. The woman slowly turned around, and Xie Shu widened her round almond eyes. The person in front of her had a similar appearance to herself, staring blankly at the person in front of her. You are just my substitute, your existence is for the arrival of this day. A cold yet weak voice came. He tightly covered his ears with both hands and murmured, no, I'm not. The woman in a goose-yellow palace dress stopped talking, her mouth slightly curved, and she stood there quietly looking at Xie Shu, with infinite sadness in her eyes. Xie Shu felt as if she had been torn apart, almost dead, and her heart was in pain like Ling Qi. She slowly opened her eyes, and the door to the sleeping room opened at some point, with Empress Xiao standing in front of her. When Xie Lian saw that the Royal Highness Princess was waking up, she hurried forward to help Xie Shu, who was pale and thin and only bones, and gave her the water in her hand. Xiao Huang showed a happy expression behind him, hesitated for a moment, and came forward to replace Kai Lian's position. With a slight smile on his lips, he kindly said, "Emperor, you have finally woken up." Xie Shu was taken aback. Did she have a sexual change? After a moment of silence, "Empress, what exactly do you want to do?" Empress Xiao seemed to have no intention, squinted her eyes, and said, "Your Majesty, what nonsense are you talking about? Are you hungry and foolish?" After speaking, she reached out and probed Xie Shu's forehead. "Xilian, you go down first." "Yes. Empress, there are no outsiders here now. What do you really want to do?" Xie Shu has been thinking about it for days, but she hasn't figured out what Empress Xiao wants her to do. Even though she and Princess Wu's biological father are both Duke of Rongua, she hasn't violated Empress Xiao's interests. Why does she insist on entering the palace on her own? Empress Xiao sneered repeatedly, "I just need you to stay well in this palace." She honestly went to marry my daughter in this palace, ensuring that this peaceful world belongs to my emperor. Seriously. Take it seriously. Although she didn't know what Empress Xiao was paying attention to, in any case, she never wanted her to stay in the palace honestly, with her eyes slightly raised and a slight ponder. "It's not impossible for me to stay here, but..." "But what?" "Before that, I want to go back to Rongua Mansion first." I turned my eyes, as if I had thought of something, and then opened my mouth. "Empress, I was not born to the same mother as the 5th Royal Highness Princess, so you are not afraid to recognize the people in this palace." Empress Xiao's eyebrows twitched slightly, her expression calm, and she pursed her lips in a soft voice, saying, "This small matter, the emperor could have said it earlier. Why should such trouble arise again?" After speaking, her delicate jade hands lifted Xie Shu's face slightly, and her vermilion lips moved slightly. "Xie Shu, do you know how much imagination your face has with the children in this palace?" She stared closely at Xie Shu's face, as if looking through it at another person she had been thinking about day and night. 6 points. Xie Shu said with some uncertainty. Empress Xiao sneered and said, "No, you and the children in this palace have an 8th imagination of your appearance. If it weren't for your beautiful little face, Xia Lang probably wouldn't have come up with a way for the cat to replace the crown prince." Shaking aside Empress Xiao's hand, she lowered her head and sneered, "How do I know you're not lying to me? My palace is in a good mood today. Let me tell you something. Xie Shu, you have been smart since childhood. Do you know why you have lost all your messages in the vast capital since you were 6 years old? Do you know that the world only knows that there is a legitimate daughter in the Rongua mansion today, but no one knows her appearance? I'm afraid you have never known about these things." She weakly curled her lips and clenched the quilt under her hands. Since the age of 6, her father had taken care of her in the deep boudoir under the guise of serving her mother. Later, she also served her grandmother. For 4 years, she had never taken a step out of the Rongua mansion and spent her days with poetry and books. Even the servants of the Rongua mansion knew little about her true appearance. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. The Royal Highness Princess. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. The Royal Highness Princess. Tears streamed through the corners of her eyes. She looked up and questioned Empress Xiao, "Are you really talking about this? Is it important whether it's true or false? Anyway, you're already here, and what's fake has become true." His tone was mixed with a hint of sharpness. "Do you think it's just a coincidence?" "No, your good father started planning a few years ago. He's putting in a lot of effort for the daughter of this palace. As for you, you're just a trivial substitute. Yes, Dad has put in so much effort for a royal daughter who speaks ill of himself. On the contrary, it is his own biological daughter, more like a dispensable stone picked up everywhere. In the past, the clouds and smoke were like a mirror of water and moon, just a beautiful dream that he had planned to weave for himself. Years of planning have only been for today. Since that's the case, then she will be a good daughter for her father once again. The street market is bustling with bright lights. Standing in the boudoir, touching the tools used in daily life one by one is so familiar yet so unfamiliar. The world suddenly fell silent. The once bustling Rongwa mansion was now unusually quiet, brushing off the dust on her hands. In a daze, the woman who had gone crazy to go home a few days ago seemed so ridiculous now. In the slightly dazed apricot eyes, there was disappointment, and tears flowed down like golden beans. Turns out, they really don't want me anymore. Crazy running towards Ning'an Hall, my parents and grandmother will definitely wait there for sure to come home. No, they won't let themselves go. When Xie Shu ran away, the guards in the back followed her closely. Before the Empress came, she told her not to let the 5th Royal Highness Princess have any problems. Standing in front of the door, Xie Shu felt a bit timid, but immediately pushed open the door with force. What caught the eye was a silence, with a shallow layer of dust spreading on the chair. How much laughter and joy there used to be, how ironic it is now. Laughing and bending down, tears finally couldn't help pouring out like spring water. It's true that you don't want me anymore, you don't want me anymore. In the past, I also didn't want you anymore. I repaid your nurturing kindness with this body. From now on, Xie Shu, no, Su Yueming is just the 5th princess of the Dan dynasty. A moment of determination flashed in his eyes, and without hesitation, he turned around and ordered, "Go back to the palace." His Royal Highness, the Crown Prince of the Dan dynasty, had delicate features and was already known as a prodigy at a young age. Even the Grand Tutor said that the Crown Prince's intelligence was rare in his life. For a Crown Prince who only pursues the pursuit of immortality, diligence and hard work are the greatest expectations of his ministers. However, it is only the norm for our Crown Prince to be able to speak at the age of 1 and write at the age of 3. The Crown Prince reads until late at night every day, regardless of whether it is windy or rainy. The Empress often reminds the Crown Prince to pay attention to his health, and even after agreeing in person, he still goes his own way in private. Zhou Hai, the leader of the Eastern Palace, walked silently with a bowl of blood swallow congee in his hand and gently placed it in the hands of the Crown Prince. He dared not make a sound. His Royal Highness used to be happy to serve the blood swallow congee, but today he is a little worried. Zhou Hai thought that the principles in the book were difficult for the young Crown Prince to understand, so he couldn't help but ask softly, "Your Highness, are you tired today? It's all packed inside, why don't we go rest for a while first?" Turning aside for a moment, her immature face lifted and looked at Zhou Hai beside her, slightly twisting her head as if she was a bit annoyed. Zhou Hai. Zhou Hai quickly took 2 steps back and knelt down, "I'm here. How has mother been lately?" Upon hearing these words, Zhou Hai trembled slightly and thought to himself that it was terrible. As expected, the young Crown Prince continued to ask, "Did Empress Huang come today?" "Go back to your Highness, the Empress has been doing very well recently, but I miss your Highness Royal Highness Princess." Speaking of this, I hesitated to bite, and then said, "The 5th princess has been busy recently, and has never been to the East Palace." The pitch-black pupils stared tightly at the servant in front of him. "You said, Huang Jie didn't come to see me." His tone was full of displeasure and awe. Zhou Hai lowered his head and knelt on the ground, anxiously waiting for a long time before hearing the Crown Prince Gu Ling's strange words. "Since Sister Huang is not coming to see me, then I will go find Sister Huang." After repeatedly complaining, the little prince revealed the lesson of disturbing the 5th Royal Highness Princess late last night. "Your Highness, listen to the words of the slave." The little prince turned around in displeasure when he saw his robe being pulled up. "Your Highness, look, it's already very late outside. You are going to disturb the 5th princess. Your Highness Royal Highness Princess must have gone to bed." The little prince's chubby little face was almost wrinkled into buns, and his small mouth was so curled that it could even hang an oil pot. He really wants to go see Empress Huang. She hasn't seen him for a long time, but what if she's already asleep? When Huang Jie gets angry, it can be very scary. The young prince still remembers one time when he wanted to play with Empress Huang and asked her to accompany him. He tore up the ink lotus that Empress Huang had worked hard to draw for half a month, and as a result, Empress Huang's face turned black on the spot. She didn't speak and stared directly at him. Later, Empress Huang ignored him for more than half a year. This incident has left a deep shadow on His Royal Highness the little prince. For him, the Empress Dowager is more important than anyone else, even more important than the Empress Dowager and father. It's strange to say that the prince has been very clever since he was young. He is not afraid to see the fifth Royal Highness Princess, but he is very afraid. He is afraid that the Royal Highness Princess will not let him go. In a word, these 5 Royal Highness Princess, after suffering from a serious illness 4 years ago, woke up with a change of taste and character, and gradually improved their body and bones. The only thing is that they don't like to go out and walk. Most of the time, they stay alone in their Chaoyun hall. Okay, let's go to bed today, but I'll go find the Empress to play tomorrow morning. Zhu Hai hurriedly stepped forward to serve the young crown prince, afraid that if he didn't pay attention, the young crown prince would change his mind again. The sky is still hazy outside. Xie Shu, no, it's Su Yueming. Although Su Yueming was still feeling a bit tired and drowsy, she didn't continue to sleep. Instead, she carefully climbed up, enduring the soreness all over her body. Kai Lian and the other maids had been waiting for a long time, waiting only for the master's summons. Hearing the sound inside, Kai Lian knew that Royal Highness Princess was waking up. Su Yueming sat by the side of the bed, slightly awake for a while. Cai Lian came in and casually hung the curtains on both sides, only to adapt to the dazzling sunlight for a long time. Colorful lotus, murmured Su Yueming. Your Highness, it's getting late. I have to go to the Empress's place to pay my respects today, but it can't be too late. Otherwise, the Empress will punish you. I will clean your face with you and comb your hair with you later. Yu Lian has fallen ill early today and can't wait to comb your hair, so let me come. Kai Lian and Yu Lian are both the grand palace maids of Su Yueming. The legitimate princess should have 4 grand palace maids. Su Yueming felt that there were too many people and that it was not enough to be pure, so she decided to only have 2 grand palace maids. She let out a sound and stood up as Cai Lian served her. From that day on, she understood that no one would come to save her, and she could no longer be Xie Shu. She could only become the legitimate princess of the Dan dynasty, Su Yueming. For 4 years, she didn't understand why Empress Xiao wanted her to be the Royal Highness Princess, but so far, the 2 people have been able to keep the water from flowing. Carefully combed Su Yueming's hair, and then picked out a few small and exquisite hairpin flowers from the jewelry box to insert. Looking at the skinny woman in the mirror, Xu Mei smiled, her eyes were full, her lips were slightly open, her beauty was as beautiful as a peach in spring, and the colorful lotus blushed slightly. At the same time, her Royal Highness Princess, even if she was privately known as the 3 most beautiful princesses in Dan dynasty, Princess Danxiao. It cannot be compared to His Highness the 5th Princess. When I thought of this, I sighed silently in my heart. Only their 5 Royal Highness Princess in the Chaoyun Hall never wanted to go out. Otherwise, the title of the most beautiful Royal Highness Princess would fall back to the 3rd Princess. Seeing Su Yueming nodded in satisfaction, the heart hanging from the colorful lotus finally relaxed. His Highness has always been picky, and his craftsmanship is decent, but he still cannot achieve a result that completely satisfies His Highness. Huang Jie, have you gotten up yet? A milky voice came in without seeing the person. A hint of impatience flashed between his eyebrows, let him go to the cafeteria and wait. Cai Lian, yes, Your Highness. Turning around, he went out to spread the word. Everyone in the whole Chaoyun Hall knew that the Royal Highness Princess was kind to people, but he did not like the prince. As if he had never known, the Prince Royal Highness ran to the Chaoyun Hall every once in a while. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. The Little Prince. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. The Little Prince. The little prince sat on a chair higher than himself, his two short legs swaying uncontrollably. He looked around and saw Xie Shu coming out. He looked behind her, but did not see Su Yueming. His small mouth suddenly sank. Xie Shu, where's my empress? Why didn't you see my empress? Salute to the young crown prince, lower your head, and say, Your Highness, Princess Palace is asking you to go to the dining hall and wait for her. Clamping his paw on the table, he jumped off the chair, climbed up and down without saying a word, and ran towards the dining room. Zhou Hai chased after him slowly, panting as he ran and said, Your Highness, please slow down. When Su Yueming arrived at the dining room, the young crown prince had already sat on the chair obediently and saw her coming. Huang Jie, you have finally arrived. The nest is almost starving to death. Before the words could be finished, the servants around were all trembling and kneeling on the ground. It's over, Huang Jie is going to punish me again. She wiped her palm on her clothes and felt it starting to hurt again. You all get up, Xie Shu, go get me the bamboo board. Glancing at the servant kneeling on the ground, he turned his head and ordered. The little prince was very aggrieved, with tears flashing in his purple grape-like eyes. Huang Jie. I was wrong, can I not make a fuss? Already had a crying tone. Su Yueming paused and twitched her eyes. Have I ever told you before, what is not to say? Her tone was very calm. We cannot say the word death. This can be said without thinking, from childhood to adulthood, it has been a lesson of blood and tears. Why are you still knowingly offending me today? The young prince felt very aggrieved. I heard what those servants said. What did you say? I said. Su Yueming raised her eyebrows and waited quietly for him to explain. Huang Jie, I told you, you're not allowed to tell anyone. Rubbing his temples, what unspeakable secret can a little brat have? You say, he said. The young crown prince sat up straight and said, Sister Huang, I heard from them yesterday that there was a plague in Sangzhou and many people starved to death. Where are you talking about? I can't believe my ears. Sangzhou. The little prince said nonchalantly, as if this was not a big deal. Sangzhou, the people of Rongua Mansion are located in Sangzhou, and all of her people are in Sangzhou. Princess Wu is also in Sangzhou. If there were a plague in Sangzhou, the consequences would be unimaginable. Does the mother know? How are the people in Rongua Mansion? She casually picked up a chopsticks of shrimp meatballs and put them in the little prince's bowl, and casually asked. The little prince couldn't take his eyes off watching Sister Huang pick up food for himself. Even if it was the shrimp meatball she disliked the most, she was very excited. Sister Huang finally picked up food for him, and he would eat it if it wasn't delicious. Su Yueming waited for a long time but didn't wait for the little prince to explain to her. He looked down and couldn't help laughing. He was eating shrimp meatballs. His cheeks were puffy, like a little squirrel. Huang Jie, don't worry. The Empress Mother already knows, so it should be nothing. Eat more, he said, and picked up a chopstick of vegetables for the young prince. Staring intently at the vegetables in the bowl, Huang Jie came to torment Wadi today. Wadi didn't want to eat any vegetables at all. Under pressure, she obediently ate them. Shui Lingling's eyes turned and she said, Huang Jie, do you want to know about the Rongua Mansion? She picked up a book casually, which was a habit she had developed in recent years. After eating, she found a place to read a book. I don't want to. She didn't want to know anything about the Rongua Mansion at all. Since she was already an abandoned child in exchange, everyone abandoned her. So, no matter what happens in that place in the future, it has nothing to do with her. The eldest daughter of Rongua Mansion passed away 2 years ago, but unfortunately, that beautiful sister, said the little prince on his own. Xie Lian was stunned when she saw that her Highness had been staring at the open book without any movement. What was wrong with her Highness? My eldest daughter passed away 2 years ago, and her voice still lingered in my ears, yet it kept repeating itself. What is the eldest daughter who passed away 2 years ago? Is she already dead in their eyes? There is no moment that can make me so painful. Never before, even when I knew I was just an exchange, I fantasized about my mother as a last resort. Now, even my mother has abandoned her, and the feeling of being abandoned once again is just like this. There are millions of ants constantly gnawing on her in my heart, and it has never been so uncomfortable. Huang Jie, what's wrong with you? He was eating while Huang Jie was sitting next to him reading a book. Why did Huang Jie cry in agony? Tears welled up unconsciously, even she didn't know she was crying. I'm fine, just a little blinded by the wind and sand, she said. The young crown prince hesitated to speak, but it was clear that Empress Dowager was lying to him. Where did the wind and sand come from here? Xie Lian, go and get a handkerchief to wipe Empress Dowager. You continue. Ah. What are you continuing with? He looked at his sister, his eyes full of confusion, wanting her to tell him what to continue with. Continue to talk about the matter of Rongwa Mansion. It's this, what did he think it was? Although their eldest daughter left, they later adopted another adopted daughter. I heard that sister is truly beautiful. After taking a sip of water and saying so much, he became thirsty. Glancing at him, gestured for him to continue. The young crown prince saw his sister finally being so devoted to something, and spoke vividly about it. I heard that Duke Rongwa resigned from his official position 4 years ago and was on his way back to his hometown. Unfortunately, he was injured by robbers and separated from the others. Fortunately, an orphan daughter saved Duke Rongwa, who was injured. Duke Rongwa and his wife were grateful for her life-saving kindness and immediately adopted her as an adopted daughter. As she was slightly older than the eldest daughter, she became the eldest daughter. The original eldest daughter was Miss Heir. The group arrived in Linzhou and coincidentally, the legitimate son of the government was born. Duke Rongwa named him Xie Lin. In the second year, 2 of Xie Shu's grandparents unfortunately passed away due to wind and cold. The following year, the second young lady Xie Shu missed her grandparents and suddenly had a high fever. 3 days later, she still couldn't handle it. It is said that when Xie Shu was buried, the Duchess of the state refused to let the second young lady be buried, and she refused to believe that her daughter had disappeared like this. After passionately discussing the experiences of the Rongwa Mansion family, her dark eyes flickered as she approached Huang Jie, hoping she would praise him. Princess Wu, oh no, to be precise, it's Xie Shu. Upon hearing the news of her beloved grandparents and her own passing, Xie Shu really doesn't know how to describe the complex state of mind at this moment. For the past 4 years, I have been living in this Chaoyun palace, not inquiring about the outside world or wanting to know about their affairs. Unexpectedly, hearing the news again would be a life and death separation. Suddenly hearing of her own death, she felt a bit overwhelmed and incredulous. It was nothing more than being abandoned again. She had already been abandoned once, and this time it was not a big deal. However, on the day she left, her grandfather and grandmother said to her, "Girl, come back quickly. Let's go to Linzhou together, see the willow trees by the river, and have some clear wine." All of this dissipated with their departure. She always thought that her father would abandon her because of Empress Xiao, her mother would abandon her because of her unborn little brother, but her grandparents wouldn't. They loved her so much, how could they abandon her? They have all left, and from now on, Xie Shu has never existed. She is no longer Xie Shu, but Su Yueming, the 5th princess of the Dan dynasty. Su Yueming waved her hand, indicating that she was tired. As for greeting, we will talk about it next time. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Conversations. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6 Conversation. Su Yueming waved her hand, indicating that she was tired. As for greeting, we will talk about it next time. The little crown prince watched in confusion as Empress Huang left, feeling lost and unsure of what had happened. Why did Empress Huang suddenly become unhappy? Huang Jie. Your Highness, the princess may not have rested well during horse training yesterday. Look, Your Highness, she won't be able to go with you to greet the Empress in a few days. Xie Shu explained thoughtfully to the young prince. But he finally waited for the imperial sister to agree to go with him to pay respects to his mother. The relationship between the imperial sister and the mother has never been good, so this opportunity finally, the young prince went alone to pay his respects to the Empress Dowager. For him, the Empress Dowager was more important than the Empress Dowager. If Empress Xiao heard his whispers, she would probably be so angry that she would vomit blood. He has a blood relationship with her and is a true mother and son. Xie Shu and he are just fake siblings, and she can't even compare to an outsider. In the Fengyi Hall, breakfast was prepared in the East Side Hall. Empress Xiao looked at the exquisite meal in front of her, but had no appetite. Empress Xiao couldn't believe that there was a sudden outbreak of plague in Sangzhou, and many people in the Ronghua mansion had already been infected with the epidemic. She patiently finished her breakfast. Empress, why don't you have some more to eat? Lu Mama approached and earnestly advised her master to eat more. Since Empress learned of the sudden epidemic in Sangzhou for decades, she has not rested or had a good meal. Empress Xiao waved her hand, and the bruise in her eyes had only increased over the past few days. She has some news, she said. Lu Mama shook her head and said, Madam, don't worry too much. The auspicious person of the young master has his own destiny, and it must be very good. Besides, everyone in the Ronghua mansion knows the identity of the young master. Whoever dares to mistreat the young master, you can rest assured. A small meatball ran in quickly, and the palace maid guarding on the road only felt the shadow flash by. Mother, are you ready for the little green you promised me a few days ago? The sound of explosion came, and Empress Xiao stared closely at the little meatball running towards her, reaching out to embrace the person in front of her. Mother, what's wrong with you? Asked the little prince, puzzled by the warm liquid on his face. Lu Mama promptly stepped forward and handed Empress Xiao a handkerchief, while responding, Your Highness, the Empress has been blinded by the wind because she misses you too much. Oh. Scratching the morning braid on her head, both Empress Dowager and Empress Dowager were blinded by the wind and sand, and looked out the window. The wind was sunny and there was no sand. What doubts does the young prince have about this? Mother, where is my little green? Her dark eyes fixed on her mother, with a momentum of not stopping until she gets her little green today. With a stern expression, he insinuated, Where is the homework you promised to mother? Why didn't mother see it? Pulling a wide sleeve adorned with intricate patterns embroidered with gold thread on one side, she wobbled and said to Empress Xiao, Mother, my good mother, please give me little green. She then raised 3 chubby fingers and said, I promise to finish my studies tomorrow, no later than tomorrow. Little monkey, don't even think about it. If you haven't finished your homework, you're not allowed to ride a horse, he said sternly, nodding the little crown prince's forehead and raising his phoenix eyes slightly. Raise your hand to cover your forehead and let out a painful ouch. She looked at the little monkey in front of her with a dumbfounded smile, full of pain. She didn't know how much strength she had exerted. Then he spoke up and asked, Where's your empress? Why didn't she come today? Xie Shu, standing on the side, timely approached and bowed to Empress Xiao. She slightly bent down and lowered her head, saying, I report to Empress Dowager that your Highness Wu felt unwell this morning and sent a servant to apologize to her. Empress Xiao furrowed her brows slightly and only instructed Xie Shu to let Su Yueming rest calmly. She didn't say much and immediately instructed Grandma Lu to go to the Chaoyun Hall with Xie Shu to send some supplements. Mother, I heard that the mission that pays homage once every 5 years is about to enter Beijing, isn't it true? Empress Xiao nodded tacitly and said, Little monkey, you know you haven't completed the homework assigned by the Grand Tutor yet. His Royal Highness, the Crown Prince, held his chin in both hands and pondered, "Mother, are these foreign countries coming to court for this father's longevity day?" The foreign countries came to the court, first, to meet with His Majesty to show their sincerity, and second, to seek a royal highness princess of the Dun dynasty to keep the marriage relationship between the two dynasties. However, in recent years, the forces from outside the Great Wall have a tendency to bully the Dun dynasty. I'm afraid this time, we should not be careful. Moreover, as Longevity Day is approaching, the feudal lords of various states under the Dun dynasty are likely to personally attend to celebrate for the emperor. Empress Xiao nodded silently, fearing that there would be more conflicts during the collision between the Longevity Festival and this foreign country's visit to Korea. Your father's Longevity Day is approaching, can you prepare a birthday gift for your father? He reached out and touched his son's hair that had not yet been crowned. The Dun dynasty stipulated that the age for men to be crowned was 20 years old, which was considered an adult. His own offspring were still young. The little crown prince lowered his small face and raised the corner of his mouth, constantly avoiding the gaze from his mother. His tone was mixed with a hint of hesitation, it should be soon. Empress Xiao had a hint of helplessness in her eyes and could only say, "Yener, no matter what, your majesty is not only the emperor of this world, but also your father. Whatever he does is rightful." Nodding nonchalantly. "For many years, my father neglected the court and only knew how to search for immortals and ask questions. The court was presided over by eunuchs and ministers. If it weren't for the foreign race of the Empress Dowager, the Dun dynasty would have already changed its surname. It's not even their turn to become the emperor of the Su family. Although the young crown prince is young, he still understands these principles." "Mother, can I come up with a palace?" the little prince hesitated and asked. "What are you doing outside the palace?" Feng's eyes scanned the palace maids around him. It was these lackluster servants who instigated his own Yener to leave the palace. Yener wouldn't want to leave the palace. Yener is still young, and Zhang Guifei and her son have been coveting the throne for a long time. The little crown prince, who pouted and didn't notice his mother's expression, said calmly, "I'm not doing anything, I just want to go out and take a look." The eldest brother brought back a beautiful vase from the Liuli Fong outside the palace a few days ago. Empress Xiao secretly clenched her fingers and bit her back teeth, whispering, "Yener, it's not that mother doesn't allow you to leave the palace. It's just that as a crown prince, you have a heavy responsibility. How can you easily leave the palace? Besides, your father's birthday gift has not been prepared yet." The young crown prince was about to write his unhappiness on his face, smacking his lips, and replied, "Yes." After bowing to Empress Xiao, she claimed to have gone back to prepare the gift. Empress Xiao looked at her son's distant back and stroked her forehead, feeling that her old illness had begun to recur. Lu Mama happened to have just returned from delivering things from the Chaoyun Palace when she saw the beads of sweat on Empress Xiao's cheeks falling uncontrollably. She quickly stepped forward and rubbed the temples on both sides of Empress Xiao's forehead. Empress Xiao closed her eyes, her expression not as painful as before, and slowly became calm. "Mammy, you're wrong to say that this palace is like this," she said. Although she spoke in an inquisitive tone, her attitude was unquestionable. Lu Mama paused slightly, but she didn't dare to make Empress Xiao notice her pause. She smiled slightly and said, "How could Empress Dowager be wrong? The crown prince is still young and doesn't understand Empress Dowager's troubles. I think she will get better if she is a little older." Empress Xiao raised her hand and signaled to Grandma Lu to stop. "You say he's young, but he's already 10 years old. At this age, the son of Consort Zhang can face the court alone and share his father's worries with the emperor." Lu Mama lowered her head and remained silent. She knew more or less about Empress Xiao's thoughts and wanted to marry the crown prince. However, the crown prince was the only son obtained by Empress Xiao through countless hardships. Although the power in various regions has been more stable in recent years, there is no need to worry about the collapse of the country. However, the empress's indulgence towards the crown prince was even greater. Although she did not spoil the crown prince to the point of being lawless, she was also responsive to his requests. Thinking back to the fact that although His Highness the Crown Prince has good talent, his reputation outside has declined in recent years. He silently sighed in his heart, and his expression was indeed as usual. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Departure from the Palace. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Departure from the palace. The next day, Su Yueming didn't read a book. Instead, she got up early to dress up and feel a bit uneasy. Although her father abandoned her, at least she stayed at that house for nearly 10 years. But whether they were alive or dead, she had to know, at least it was a family affair. Although Su Yueming has been working hard to straighten herself since waking up in the morning, her abilities are limited. Whether at the Xie family or in the palace, there are always people waiting in front of her, and it's okay for her to dress herself. However, it's a bit difficult for her to comb her hair with green hair in a neat and stylish way. Xie cautiously walked in from outside the palace, holding a navy blue eunuch robe in her hand. When she arrived inside, she saw Princess Wu sitting in front of the dowry in a daze, holding a comb in her hand and not knowing what she was thinking. Su Yueming was secretly regretting that she couldn't even do a good job of combing her hair. When she got angry, she casually threw the comb onto the dowry, making a loud bang. Xie hurriedly stepped forward and placed the clothes she was holding in her hand. She quickly approached and said, "Oh my goodness, what kind of anger are you using?" She picked up a comb and used it to straighten her hair while putting it back in place. Su Yueming remained silent for a long time. "Everything is ready." "Everything is ready, but Your Highness, if the Empress knows." Su Yueming's recent departure from the palace was a silent ideology, afraid of attracting attention from others. How could she possibly go and inform Empress Xiao? "Don't bother. It's not my own mother, and I can't care about her. It's just a nominal mother and daughter." Xie first combed Su Yueming's hair into a bun, then changed her clothes, and finally presented a small eunuch in front of everyone. At the beginning of noon, the maid in charge led a group of eunuchs and palace maids through the long corridor, walked for a while, and arrived at a corner gate, where a long queue had already formed. The front palace maid carried a bundle made of linen on her back. After being inspected by the guards, she took out a token made of an unknown material. The inspector glanced at the token and waved her hand to let the person go. Soon, it was the turn of the leading nanny in charge. The guard saw the nanny in charge and licked her face with a flattering smile, saying, "Grandma Zhang, you're here. If you have anything to tell me today, just let me know." Zhang Mama looked like a caretaker, her chin almost lifted to the sky, and she ignored the person's words. She glanced sideways at the guard and walked straight to the inspection office. The caretaker saw that Grandma Zhang had no dust under her eyes, so he thought he was asking for trouble and raised his hand to scratch his head unnaturally. Mama Zhang instructed the young palace maids who went home to visit relatives and the eunuchs who went out to buy to inspect their belongings and wait in the shade. The person who checked the package didn't dare to delay seeing that it was Grandma Zhang waiting, so they roughly looked at it and let it go. However, as a thin eunuch passed by, he reached out and shouted, "Stop." The eunuch was stopped, his body trembling uncontrollably. He slowly turned around and a hoarse voice came, "Your Excellency." Listening to the slightly trembling voice of the eunuch, the examiner approached and handed out a token, "I forgot to take your belongings." The thin and weak eunuch lowered his head, reached out a hand as white as jade, and took the token. "Your hand is so tender." With just one sentence, the eunuch trembled with fear. The inspector sneered, not that he looked down upon these filthy people, but that he only knew how to fight and fight. Look, a single sentence scared him so much that he was so useless. Once again, he secretly despised these rootless people in his heart. With disgust, he furrowed his eyebrows and said, "All right, you go." The eunuch felt relieved and quickly turned around, wiping the non-existent sweat from his forehead with his sleeve. Zhang Mama was already impatiently waiting and opened her mouth, cursing, "How did it happen? Why is it so slow? I don't know what it's like to raise you, a bunch of trash." The guard happened to hear Zhang Mama's words and respectfully waited for Zhang Mama and her group to walk away. They spat out a mouthful of water on the ground and said to the people around them, "Don't think that having Zhang Guifei as a support behind them would make you lawless." When the people around heard this, they looked anxiously at their side, making sure they didn't hear what they had just said. Then they said, "You don't want to die, I want to die. There is Empress Zhang behind them, and she has a great prince beside her, who is deeply favored by his majesty." The person who cursed at Grandma Zhang had just arrived, and upon hearing these words, they could only admit that they were unlucky. After Zhang Mama and her group walked into a small alley and assigned the task of purchasing this time, they dismissed everyone and went back to their mother's house to pick up their newborn grandson. At first, the eunuch followed a few palace maids to a bustling street. While the maids were not paying attention, he dodged into a ready-to-wear shop and transformed into a charming young master when he came out. Su Mingyue was walking on the street, looking east and west for a stroll. When she was bored, she walked into a tea house, found a secluded place, ordered a pot of tea, and listened to the storyteller telling. The storyteller is telling the story of the Xie family in the Ronggua mansion. It is said that after the Xie family in the Ronggua mansion gave birth to their legitimate son Xie Lin in Linzhou, Lady Xie took care of her in Linzhou for a month, and then went south to Cangzhou. The rest of the story was told almost verbally by the young prince. Until the storyteller finished speaking, Su Yueming did not hear what he wanted. The crowd took out 2 and placed it in the corner of the table. Time has changed. When she was still in the Ronggua mansion, she also liked to come here to listen to people's stories. However, at that time, she was only listening to other people's stories. I never expected that there would be a day when she would also listen to herself. Just as he was about to get up, a person next to him stood up, shook his sleeve, bowed and said to Su Yueming, "Brother, I see that you are quite interested in the matter of the Ronggua mansion. May I ask if you could listen to me?" Su Mingyue was a bit surprised. How could this person tell that she was interested in the Ronggua mansion? After regaining her senses, she quickly bowed back and said, "Do you have any insights, brother?" The two of them sat nearby and said, "I don't have much opinion, I just want to chat with you, brother. However, my cousin, you see that there is neither good wine nor good food here. How can I tell you, brother?" Su Yueming gave him a knowing smile and even instructed the waiter to serve a table of good wine and dishes. During the serving, Su Yueming learned that this person's name was Ji Ansuan, from Kangwu County, Suzhou. "Brother Xie, it turns out that you are a relative of the Xie family in the Ronggua mansion. Please forgive me for my clumsiness. I really didn't notice it," Ji Ansuan said to Su Yueming vaguely as he wolfed down the food. Su Yueming nodded and agreed with Ji Ansuan's fabrication of her identity. She tentatively asked, "Brother Ji just said he knew about the Ronggua mansion. I don't know what happened." Ji Ansuan wiped his mouth and reached out to take out a red paper from his chest. "Brother Xie, you don't know about this. I have been engaged to the eldest daughter of the Ronggua mansion, Xie Shu, since we were young." He handed the red paper to Su Yueming and said, "I just don't know how she is doing now." Upon hearing these words, Su Yueming felt like a bolt from the blue. What kind of engagement was it? She didn't know that she had been engaged to someone since she was young. She took the red paper and carefully looked at it, only to see that it was written clearly in black. A wedding letter, with the heavenly court above and the earthly palace below, should be played up to the ninth sky, witnessed by the ancestors of the heavens. If you betray a beautiful woman, it is bullying the heavens. The crime of deceiving the heavens will lead to the death of the body. If a beautiful woman betrays her, it would be against the will of heaven. The 3 realms will be expelled, and there will be no reincarnation. This certificate. Ji Ansuan Xie Shu sorry. I don't know if this marriage letter is written correctly, but I hope the children can understand and point it out. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Unmarried Husband. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Unmarried Husband. After silently reading the marriage letter handed over by Ji Yansuan, Su Yueming froze for a moment, her face turning even whiter, so shocked that she let the marriage letter in her hand drift down. Ji Yansuan saw that the wedding letter was about to fall to the ground, and quickly caught it. After carefully examining it and confirming that it was not damaged, he kicked it in his arms like a lifeline and muttered uncontrollably, "Brother Xie, what's wrong with you? How could you let such an important thing fall to the ground?" My heart was almost pounding out of my throat, forcing me to calm down. My face was as white as paper, and my eyes flickered in panic, saying, I was just too shocked. I didn't expect Brother Ji that you even had an engagement with Xie Shu, the eldest daughter of the Ronggua mansion. Looking at her fiancé who was completely unaware in front of her, Xie Shu, as Su Yueming, was filled with mixed emotions for a moment. Ji Yansuan gave Su Yueming a white glance, full of tenderness and longing, and said, "You don't know, the engagement was made by our ancestors. According to my grandmother, it was Xie Chong, the old ancestor of Ronggua mansion, who received kindness from our ancestors that year, so she signed a marriage agreement with me." Xie Chong is a taboo name of my grandfather, but it is such an important matter that I have never heard my grandfather talk about from childhood to adulthood. Brother Ji, is it possible that you got the wrong person? I grew up in the capital and never heard of the Xie family girl's engagement. Ji Yansuan let out a sigh, with a hint of helplessness in his tone, and then said, "Brother Xie, I don't know. Although you are Miss Xie's close relative, the engagement was privately made by Duke Xie and my grandfather. I guess apart from him and his grandfather, very little is known about it. I only learned about it when my grandparents talked about it when I came in." Well, her so-called fiancé who was only recently aware of her involvement in this marriage, touched her head awkwardly. "Brother Xie, do you know where the Ronggua mansion family is now? I have been inquiring multiple times lately, but I have not found out." "I don't know. Although it is highly likely that the person in front of her is her fiancé, she is no longer a girl from the Ronggua mansion. Even if this marriage is hers, it is not her turn anymore." Sincere and innocent Chao Jiansuan shook her head, indicating that she really didn't know. Okay, I guess I was very disappointed by this tone. At this moment, the person sitting at the neighboring table eavesdropping on their conversation couldn't help but interject, "You don't know about this, do you? Duke Ronggua resigned and returned to his hometown a few years ago." Ji Yansuan felt refreshed when he saw that someone might know about his fiancé's news. "Brother, do you know where they are now?" The eavesdropper saw that Ji Yansuan didn't even know this, and couldn't help but slander him. He looked up and down, but he didn't know where he came from. He was also the fiancé of the eldest daughter of the Ronggua mansion, and he didn't know if it was true or false. On the surface, it doesn't seem obvious. In Sangzhou, I just heard that this eldest daughter has been very weak in recent years. There is still a plague in Sangzhou, and I don't know if Miss Xie can survive safely. Upon hearing these words, Ji En's face was filled with worry, and he knew whether he was comforting himself or others. He confidently said, "Miss Xie, Ji Ren has her own destiny and can definitely be safe." Now it's Su Yueming's turn to wonder, whether it's because her eldest daughter or herself has already passed away, how can she still be alive? What Su Yueming didn't know was that after Duke Ronggua took the real fifth princess as his adopted daughter, he felt that he had mistreated her and publicly claimed that the real fifth princess was Xie Shu's younger sister. However, due to her weak body, she rarely appeared in front of others. Coincidentally, due to the premature death of her legitimate daughter, her second legitimate daughter became her eldest legitimate daughter. Unfortunately, the news of the real eldest daughter's premature death had not been spread for long before she was resurrected. Therefore, everyone thought there was some dark dragon in the middle, and the eldest daughter was still the same person. It was just a joke, and talking about it would pass. Just as Su Yueming was lost in thought, the two people on the side had already become brothers. After a conversation, they both said goodbye. After leaving the tea house, Ji Ansuan reminisced about the exchange and said regretfully, "I don't know how old that brother was and where he lives. If there is a chance to visit him next time." Turning his head for a while, he looked at the confident person in front of him who didn't know exactly where he came from. Even if Ping Shui met, he could feel a sense of regret for meeting him too late. With his naturally mature personality, he could eat wherever he went. I couldn't help but feel envious in my heart. I was afraid that even after practicing for a few more years, I might not be able to reach this level. I shook my head and then fanned the fan in my hand. "Brother Xie, do you have any plans next?" "No, I don't know what arrangements Brother Ji has." Ji Ansuan pretended to ask with a "follow me" look on his face. "Could you please come with me, Brother Xie?" As expected, he reached out and made a "please" gesture, letting him go first. The two of them walked side by side on this bustling street for a long time, with a constant stream of people coming and going. Su Yueming looked at a person who had passed by in confusion, but at first glance, he didn't seem to be from the capital. Her hair is black and slightly curved, her face is chubby, with high cheekbones and dark yellow skin. She has thick eyebrows and big eyes, a flat chin with sparse beard. She combs her braided hair and wears clothes from people outside the Great Wall, making her look out of place. Ji Ansuan walked straight ahead, talking to himself, suddenly realizing that no one had responded to him. He turned around and said, "Brother Xie, why haven't you left?" Seeing Su Yu's sleepy expression on his face, he knew he was curious about these people from beyond the Great Wall. Unable to resist his enthusiasm, he took the initiative to explain to him, "Brother Xie, are you curious about these people?" Upon hearing a positive voice, my eyes lit up with joy. It seemed that this person knew what to write, so I stepped forward quickly. Ji Ansuan walked and said, "As far as I know, the tribute that takes place once every 5 years is about to begin, and there are rumors that this tribute is for the sake of obtaining a princess, but is it just true or false?" The pupils suddenly dilated, and he lowered his head, concealing the incomprehensible emotions in his eyes. Seeing the person beside him bowing his head and pondering something, he pursed his lips and continued, "Besides, it's almost the same as the time of Wanshou festival. Various feudal lords will also send people to the capital, so it must be very lively then." Su Yueming's eyes were mixed with a hint of contemplation. How could an unknown junior be so clear about the affairs in the palace? "Brother Ji, but how did you learn about this?" Ji Ansuan looked at his newly recognized younger brother like an idiot, not knowing how ignorant he was. "It's just that, let him, the elder brother, come and help him clarify his confusion. Recently, in order to learn about the news of the Rongua mansion, I have mostly been in the tea house, and these news are naturally told by storytellers. These storytellers who have been wandering in the market all day are extremely well informed." "Oh." His eyes flickered a few times before he spoke up and asked, "Do you know which princess the tribute country outside the Great Wall wants to marry this time, Brother Ji?" Ultimately, he asked his innermost doubts. Attached to Su Yueming's ear, he said quietly with his hand, "It should be the legitimate 5 Royal Highness princess." After speaking, he nodded earnestly and forcefully. Before meeting, Ji Ansuan's thick and black eyelashes were clearly visible, and those who trembled as if they could bring wind slowly closed their eyes. The bright red lips became pale like paper, slightly pursed, and their skin was as white as jade, like glass. People seemed to be enduring huge pain, and a few drops of pearls couldn't stop slipping from the corners of their eyes. I was vaguely stunned by the beauty in front of me, but at this moment, I saw him crying silently. Suddenly, I came back to my senses and felt helpless as I tried to wipe away his tears. My hand reached out halfway and stopped. The two big men, wiping Xie's tears themselves, felt strange no matter how they looked. "Brother Xie, don't scare me." His voice was full of concern. A thin sadness surfaced, and something that had been hard to understand finally came to an answer today. I finally understood why Empress Xiao and her father had to switch sides. It turned out that she was heartbroken for her daughter, and now she wished to immediately confront her father and say, "Am I not your daughter?" My heart is filled with disappointment, and no one in this world can speak of it. It feels like a big hole has been dug out in my heart. The deep pain makes me wish I could die now. She is no longer the fragile Xie Shu from 4 years ago, and nothing can bring her down. This pain is nothing compared to before. If you want to send yourself out for a marriage, you can, but no one can control her fate. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Cockfighting. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Cockfighting. My mood slightly calmed down, and there was a hint of madness in the center of my eyes. A faint smile appeared at the corner of my mouth, and my chin slightly lifted. Brother Jie, there's no need to worry. I just had an old illness just now, it's not a problem. Well, this is definitely a disease for her. Ji Ansuan nodded busily, muttering softly, "It's okay, you scared me to death just now." He patted his chest with lingering fear. Su Yueming opened her mouth and smiled silently. The fan pointed out, "What is that doing?" The fan pointed out that the crowd was surging, with many people standing there, shouting and discussing intertwined. The two of them quickly walked forward, passed through the alley, squeezed through the dense crowd, and came to the front end. At a glance, it turned out to be cockfighting. The two chickens on the field were at a critical moment when a big rooster, covered in oily and shiny red feathers, angrily charged forward with its bright red comb. One of them heard the blue veins on the neck of the person next to him tense up and shout, "King Kong, come on, kill it." She looked sideways and saw that the big rooster's opponent was an extremely weak chick, with no other advantages except for its colorful feathers, and it was not even half the size of the big rooster. "Brother Xie, who do you think these two chickens will win?" "That big one." Upon hearing Brother Xie mention the majestic and powerful rooster, Ji Ansuan went against the trend and said, "I think the smaller one should win." Suddenly, he thought of something. His eyes lit up, he coughed lightly, and he spoke thoughtfully, "Why not, Brother Xie? How about we have a bet?" Su Yueming put her hands on her hips and smiled happily, smug and unrestrained. She pointed at Ji Ansuan and said, "Bet, but I think you're going to lose." "How can you bet?" "How about 20 taels of silver?" "Sure." She has always been a clever person, and this majestic rooster can win at a glance. She is determined to win these 20 taels of silver, and it seems that she can still pick up 20 taels of silver for free today. At this moment, the battle situation became increasingly fierce. Looking closely, the big rooster took off and grabbed at the weak chicken, relying on its strong physique to press down on the weak chicken. "Go on, Kong, crush it, come on. Give it a go, we're about to win. Eagle, get up quickly." The owner of the weak chicken called out with heartache to his eagle, which had been crushed by Kong Kong and had no resistance. Just as everyone thought that King Kong was about to win, and even the owner of the eagle believed the same, the eagle rose up and fought back. King Kong didn't pay attention and the eagle escaped. Upon seeing the victory escape from his hands, King Kong became angry and ashamed. With a murderous aura, he chased after the eagle, whose huge body occupied the field. However, the eagle relied on its small yet agile body to shuttle back and forth, successfully escaping King Kong's angry pursuit. After a few rounds, King Kong seemed to find this endless game of cat and mouse somewhat boring. After one escape, the eagle successfully predicted its next hiding spot and arrived there early, preparing for a final kill. However, to his surprise, the eagle only fired a false shot, but the kill failed, and King Kong showed signs of fatigue. The time came, and the eagle leaped forward with a stunning victory. "Ha ha ha, I won. See, I won. Quick, fast, give me the money." One person happily reached out to the person in front of him, gesturing for him to give me the money. The person next to him couldn't help but say, "What's so urgent? I can't give you what I owe you." Su Yueming walked out dejected, took out a bag of silver from her sleeve, and said in a sullen tone, "Here you are, you won." Reaching out to take the money bag, Ji Ansuan now looked radiant and full of energy. I saw my 20 taels of silver being put into my pocket without hesitation, as if my flesh had been cut by a knife, and I wanted to cry without tears. Tiger and Tiger stepped forward and hugged Brother Xie's shoulder with great vigor, saying, "Oh, Brother Xie, who are you? How could you care about this meager 20 taels of silver? A good man should treat money like dirt. Don't worry about such small money." "You say so. What is it? How could Bai Hua Yin not care?" She looked at the person who had just received 20 taels of silver and was about to fly with shock in her eyes. She only knew that this slippery guy had such thick skin. The ancients never deceived me, and we can't just look at the surface. Now she just feels like she should chop her hands. Why gamble? Her heart is full of resentment. "Since I won Brother Xie's money, then I will show great mercy and help you solve your doubts, Brother Xie." After Ji Ansuan's explanation, Su Yueming finally understood how the eagle won. At the same time, a young man with several servants and a box walked in the corridor of Empress Zhao's ancestral home, the Marquis of Chengyan's mansion. In the living room, the young man ordered several servants to put down their boxes and go out, only to see a few people leave. Young Master Shao quickly stepped forward and opened the box. "Quickly, come out, they have all left." His eyes were still not looking around, afraid of someone coming. The person hiding in the box hurriedly got up and took a deep breath of fresh air. "Thank you, cousin." If Su Yueming was present, she would recognize this person as her restless younger brother, His Highness the Crown Prince. "Cousin, you have to thank me well this time. I worked hard to get you out," he said, taking out a fan from his sleeve and fanning it with a self-proclaimed charm. "Got it, cousin. When I return to the palace, I will definitely find some treasures for you to give you." Shao Err, who was fanning, suddenly thought of something. He panicked and pulled the little prince away. The unsuspecting little prince exclaimed, "Cousin, what are you doing? Hurry up, Dad, come back quickly. If my father found out that he secretly took his cousin out of the palace, he might be able to peel off a layer of skin from him." The two climbed out of a small dog hole on the west side of the wall of the Marquis of Chengyan's mansion and said, "Cousin, can't we just walk through the main entrance?" Prince Shao poked the young prince with a fan and joked, "Are you trying to kill your cousin?" The young crown prince remained silent. Yes, his mother did not allow him to leave the palace, so he begged his cousin to secretly take him out. This young Master Shao Err is an ignorant and mischievous demon king, and seeing his cousin trapped in the palace, he felt pitiful. Standing on the street, the young prince took a deep breath and was deeply attracted by the scene he had never seen before. The people on the street were bustling, which was completely different from the silence and solemnity in the palace. Compared to the palace, he loves this place too much. "Cousin, it's not that I'm talking about you. Quickly take away your ignorant appearance, and don't lose face with me, the most beautiful man in the capital." Shao Gongzi sneered at his inexperienced cousin. "Cousin, why are you doing what now? What are you doing? You don't even know about this." Shaking his head with a fan, "Of course you're going to the paradise world of Spring Breeze Tower on Earth. You must have never been there before." The young crown prince was a bit at a loss. Why did his cousin go to the Pure Land? In the past, when the Empress Dowager left, the Empress Dowager said, "Your Empress Dowager went to the Pure Land to see your grandfather. You should be happy." At that time, he thought his grandmother would come back soon after she went, but it was a long time before he found out that she didn't want him anymore. She had already died and would never wake up again. Now, my cousin is also going to the paradise and taking him with him. Although he also misses his grandmother very much, cousin, why don't we go another day? Shao Ergong looked at his cousin, who was trembling uncontrollably and half open in his mouth, and once again whispered to himself, "This cousin is widely believed to be as intelligent as he is. Now it seems that he is no more than that," so he pulled the little prince and left. My second request. Comments, recommendations. End of this chapter. 10, Chapter 10 Spring Breeze Tower. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10 Spring Breeze Tower. The night gradually fell, and the sparsely populated streets of the day gradually became bustling under the cover of darkness. When the two cousins stepped onto this street with red and green lights, the young prince of the Shao family's soul was immediately drawn away. The young crown prince immediately understood where his cousin's paradise was, and his eyes were filled with disgust. The father emperor doted on Zhang Guifei and her eldest brother, who also loved him very much. The empress dowager has been neglected for years. If it weren't for the repeated support of his ministers, the crown prince would have long wanted to depose him and give him to his eldest brother. From childhood to adulthood, he never detested the birds and swallows in his father's palace. Turning around and wanting to leave, young Master Shao quickly grabbed the young crown prince and shouted, "Cousin, don't hurry." Finally, he pulled his little cousin down to the door of the Spring Breeze Tower, taking a deep breath, his brows and eyes filled with relief. The madam of the Spring Breeze Tower shook off her handkerchief, which was covered in an unknown fragrance, when she saw a familiar guest coming. She shouted into the room, "Girls, come out to pick up the guests. Young Master Shao Heir is here." The girls in the room were energized when they heard that young Master Shao Heir had arrived. Who doesn't know the name of young Master Shao Heir in this Spring Breeze Tower? It's probably a waste of this precious land. Young Master Shao Heir, a frequent guest of the Spring Breeze Tower, spends money like dirt and has a good night. The girls of the Spring Breeze Tower don't even need to consider their food and clothing expenses for the next 6 months. The so-called eating for half a year refers to this. In fact, young Master Shao Heir's skill of gambling is superb, generous, and good-looking. Which girl wouldn't love such a wealthy man? Sitting inside the bustling crowd, "Madam, I'm telling you that my younger brother is very wealthy and must find a clean girl," she said, giving a nod to the madam. The madam immediately understood and summoned a servant, instructing, "Go, call down the new yener who came a few days ago to my mother." "Yes, Mom." Seeing that the madam is very sensible, Shao Gongzi is very satisfied with it. A mother who knows how to come can keep customers for a long time. The young prince looked around and saw a drunken man holding a glass of wine. Seeing that the woman next to him had a slight appearance, he reached out and hugged her in his arms, drinking, "Here, pour me a drink for you." The woman was not angry either. She poured a glass of wine with a smile on her face. With a charming smile, a pear vortex appeared and a beautiful curve curved her mouth to tease the drunken man. Turning his head, he shrunk his neck, his brows filled with disgust, and he squinted slightly with a hint of coldness in his eyes. The little prince's appearance at this moment was exactly the same as Empress Xiao's. He feels that staying here any longer will make it difficult to breathe. He didn't know why he had this emotion. It seemed that every man should enjoy such a scene. At least his father, his cousin in front of him, and his eldest brother were not much older than him. However, he didn't like such an occasion. He spoke to his cousin, who was immersed in the gentle countryside, and regardless of whether he heard it or not, he stood up and left. When I came to a step, I didn't notice that I bumped into someone and was about to shout, "Dare." I looked up and saw that the person in front of me was exactly the same as Sister Huang, and the voice had stopped abruptly before she uttered her throat. The person across from him was obviously shocked by what he saw, and even reached out to rub his eyes, confirming what he saw again. "Brother Xie, why are you walking so fast? I haven't even taken a good stroll around the Spring Breeze Tower yet, so you're in a hurry to leave. You don't understand the fun. A voice came and a figure chased after you from afar." The little prince felt uneasy in his heart, and a hint of panic and fear flashed between his eyebrows. He tentatively shouted, princess. Su Yueming didn't speak either. She wrapped her arms around her hands and hummed a smile from her nose, with an inexplicable meaning on the corner of her mouth. She became curious about how the crown prince, who was supposed to work hard in the East Palace at this time, appeared here. He shrank his body and felt very scared. He had confirmed that this person was Empress Dowager, and only Empress Dowager would look at him in this posture. A weak cry came out, Huang Jie. Seeing Huang Jie's eyes blink, she immediately dared not speak. Brother Xie, it's not that I said. You don't need to be in such a hurry, right? Followed Ji Yansuan, bowing down and panting incessantly. This is. Young brother, he explained unhappily. The two simple words made the two people present feel uneasy. It turns out it's my younger brother. Seeing the other two people not speaking, one was afraid to speak, and the other was unwilling to speak. Ji Yansuan was so embarrassed that he could use his foot buttons to leave the 3-bedroom and 1 living room. The atmosphere gradually solidified, and he secretly glanced at the other two people. Why don't we find a place to sit first? This is not a good place to chat, do you think? The three of them found a secluded tea house and sat there, their eyes wide open. Originally, after gambling on cockfighting on the street, Su Yueming and Xie Shu went to listen to a song of Farewell My Concubine. The night was very dark, and Su Yueming was preparing to bid farewell, but Ji Yansuan pulled her to the Spring Breeze Tower. Su Yueming couldn't resist him and could only come, but just arrived, feeling really uncomfortable in his heart. He was in a hurry to leave, which led to the scene just now. The tea has been cold for a long time. Brother Ji, my younger brother is young and cannot stay outside for a long time. I think we should say goodbye first. Ji Yansuan quickly reached out to stop him and anxiously said, Brother Xie, can you listen to me? I shouldn't have been able to manage my younger brother's family affairs, but I think you are very close to me. With nowhere to put his hands, he awkwardly scratched his head. Well, I think he's still a child. Although he can't enter that kind of romantic place, Brother Xie, you still need to take it lightly. The young crown prince's eyes widened instantly. How could this guy be so bad? He instigated the imperial sister to beat him up the first time we met. It was too inhumane, too bad. Su Yueming suddenly felt her sleeves tighten, lowered her head, and saw the young crown prince's wet eyes wide open, with a face full of grievances. She casually said, Thank you very much, Brother Ji. At this moment, Jian felt uneasy and his face gradually turned red, feeling embarrassed. Actually, I have another heartless request from my brother, I don't know. I looked at Ji Yansuan with suspicion, wondering if there was something wrong with him now. He used to be quite easygoing, but now he's so awkward and uncomfortable. Just say something, I said after hesitating for a while. He finally said, I want to borrow money. After speaking, he was afraid that Su Yueming wouldn't agree, so he quickly explained, Brother Xie, you know, I might have to go south to find my fiancée Ae after today, but I'm really ashamed of you. After taking a sip of water and taking a deep breath, you know, I came from Suzhou and my travel expenses and miscellaneous matters have already been spent. Su Yueming had a feeling in her heart that she had finally arrived. At first, she felt that people like Ji Yansuan, even if they would take the initiative to talk to you, should not wander aimlessly all day. It was probably when he mistakenly thought he was from the Xie family that he made up his mind. She boasted that she could never be Xie Shu again, but she couldn't remain indifferent to the person who was once about to become her husband. With a sincere heart, she bravely invited him here, thinking that she could find her fiancé Ae in this vast capital city. But he didn't think about it either. It was just that the Xie family admitted to this marriage letter and tried every means to regret it. Fate dictated that the two still met once. Looking at this person who was extremely similar to her former self, Su Yueming decided to help him once, as if it was to pay tribute to her deceased self. With a calm expression and a faint smile, okay, I'll lend it to you. Hearing the sound coming from my ear, it was like a heavenly melody. I laughed happily and quickly clasped my fists to express my gratitude. Thank you very much, Brother Xie. I will definitely remember your great kindness in my heart. End of this chapter.